Hey, I'm Laura. Just quickly, we here at GRITtv are proud to bring you independently produced content every day. Now it's your chance to help us. GRITtv has been offered a $100,000 challenge grant. Every dollar you give right now between now and June 30th is worth $3 to us. We've only got a few more weeks to meet the match. Will you help? You can donate at our website, GRITtv.org. Meanwhile, enjoy this clip. We still don't know the numbers or the names of the dead from Israel's flotilla attack Monday, but more ships are on their way to bring aid to Gaza, and Israel's saying that next time they'll use more force. Ending the blockade is clearly moving to top priority for some. Tens of thousands were out in the streets around the world in the last few days. At the same time, there are increasing amounts of oil lapping onto the Gulf Coast's tender marshland habitats, threatening all sorts of life, including the humankind. Foreclosures continue, and let's not forget, escalation of war in Afghanistan, Obama's war. What then is an activist to do on the progressive side? Next up, a man who, like so many these days, is busy on lots of fronts, David Swanson. Progressives are constantly told they must keep the pressure on. But how do you decide where to put what pressure in times like these? David Swanson next of warisacrime.org joins me right here in studio.
Yes, we have begun both a criminal as well as a civil investigation, as is our obligation under the law.
Israeli commandos descended upon the ship in international water from a helicopter.
We take a moment here to remember the now 1,000 Americans killed in the war in Afghanistan.
So, David, that's just an example of, the news this morning. You've got disasters on what seem like every front. You're active. You have a mailing list of many from your days with DowningStreet.org, now renamed warisacrime.org. You send out alerts constantly to people to get active. What, for example, are you telling people to do today?
Well, one priority, of course, has to be do no more harm. And so where there is a chance to stop a massive action that makes things worse on some of these fronts, in fact, perhaps all of these fronts to the extent that things are connected and financially it's all the same pot of money, we have to put up our best effort to stop that thing. So this week, while Congress members are home preparing to go back to Congress next week and vote for $33.5 billion to escalate a war that nobody can defend the continuation of, we have to put up our greatest effort possible to say no to that. And whether we win or not, build a force, build an independent activist organization, build a caucus in the House of Representatives that begins to say no to that money. And to the extent that they're packaging all sorts of good stuff in there that provides no legitimate excuse and could be passed separately, but leads to the Republicans all voting no, as they voted no last week on a much bigger war funding bill, as they voted no last summer on the other war supplemental bill, then we have a real opportunity where we only need 40 of the much greater number of Democrats who claim to oppose the war to actually vote no.
But right at this moment, a whole lot of people have refocused on not on the Afghanistan escalation, but instead on Israel, and on, in particular, U.S. military support for Israel. $7 million still a day in military aid.
Including the peace movement. People are working on both of these fronts, but there's no reason you can't, and they're not unrelated. And it comes down to where we're putting our money. These were U.S. helicopters, U.S. weapons used by Israel. This is a military funded by Israel, but also crimes defended by this country and by this country's media.
So as you hear the President and the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, call for investigations, I'm sort of waiting, okay, well, until those investigations, we'll hold back the aid. We haven't heard announcements like that.
We have not. And when the Vice President last year defended Israel's sovereign right to attack other nations and other people as if this was the most uncontroversial thing he could say, no one called him on that. And when you have, imagine if Obama's forces attacked a teabagger party, or the people at Waco or Ruby Ridge fought back, you would not have the blame being placed on them. You would not say we have to wait and investigate what happened. This is an international crime that has been denounced by respected parties and nations around the world, there's no ground for hesitation. It's like asking BP to run the cleanup and investigate itself, asking Israel to investigate itself. It's outrageous.
How do you see the connections between the BP disaster and the war funding that you're talking about?
Well, you know, there are some obvious connections in the sense that these wars are fought largely on behalf of these same corporations. And, you know, we overthrew the democratic leader of Iran 50 years ago on behalf of BP and have had trouble there ever since. Same corporate power, it's the same corporate decision making, and it's the same lack of accountability that makes these things possible. Now we have a criminal investigation of BP. I'm not going to hold my breath for it to become actual prosecutions, but that's what we have to push for, and of Massey Energy, and of these other corporations pre-catastrophe. We don't have to wait for the next disaster and then prosecute them. We don't have to put this money for new nuclear power plants in this war funding bill and then wait for a disaster at one of them and then plead for a prosecution. We have to stop and do no harm, but we can't stop what's happening unless there's accountability.
So you believe that pulling the war funding string is the most effective one to unravel many of these ills, many of these harms?
Well, I think that it includes the funding of Israel and Egypt and our bases around the world and the waste in the military outside of the wars and all of it, because that's where over half of our money goes. And, you know, right now we have labor unions and teachers unions and disaster aid relief groups supporting a bill because their good things have been packaged in with the war funding. And we have to come together as a coalition and say, no, we're going to back clean funding for these good things, because if we do that, then we have massively more funding available for where funding ought to be spent.
I commented last week that I didn't appreciate my LGBT equal rights being used as a kind of bribe to vote for more war.
I retweeted you. I think it was absolutely the right thing to say. And I don't think the people of Haiti want to have so-called relief, which will in large part take the form of military occupation, put as lipstick on a bill for war in Afghanistan, to escalate war in Afghanistan.
So to roll back just a second, when you talked about more money being spent on the military, people maybe need to hear the statistic. 58% of all federal discretionary funding spent on Pentagon or Pentagon-related activities. And that includes the Israel funding.
People have no idea whatsoever, and I've talked nationally and locally in my town with people in the Tea Party and so forth, people whose great cry is to stop the reckless spending of money, and they have no idea that the money goes to the military and the wars more than to things like healthcare and teachers, and when they find out, they're very hesitant to oppose it, and which looks like hypocrisy from our side. Whereas from their side, when they see us talking about money and then they find out that our real motivation is that we don't like killing people, they think we're hypocrites. There's this huge gap between us. But a lot of people out there who are not really active in either of these categories just don't know that most of our money goes to the wars and the military, and that if it didn't, we could be like other wealthy nations and fund things that we don't even dream of, not just oversight of energy production, not just a decent law enforcement organization, but free quality education, preschool through graduate school, top-level green energy programs, everything that you don't dare dream about.
Maybe we could even fund publicly funded elections, and some of these corporations wouldn't have the power they do over our politicians.
Well, this is part of the answer to how we get control, because we can't just dream up what we should do if we were the president, but we have to figure out how we organize the people to influence the Congress to make these things happen, and that includes getting rid of rights for corporations as people.
All right. Well, if you want more information, and I bet you do, you can find it at David's website. We will link to David Swanson at GRITtv.org, where you'll also find a link to his book, Daybreak.